Imagine a universe where the apocalypse is not a future event, not a prophecy waiting to be fulfilled, but a condition that has already settled into reality and refuses to leave. This is not a galaxy standing on the edge of destruction. This is a galaxy that crossed that edge long ago and kept moving anyway. Warhammer 40,000 is not a setting where hope is lost. It is a setting where hope has been dissected, weaponized, and repurposed into another tool of suffering. Every civilization here exists in a state of prolonged death, sustained only by momentum, denial, and violence. Empires do not rise to greatness. They rot slowly, clinging to memories of what they once were. Gods are not distant myths. They are active, malignant forces feeding on emotion like parasites bloated on excess. Now, into this universe of eternal collapse, imagine something arriving that does not belong to this system at all. Not a conqueror seeking dominion, not a savior seeking worship, but a being who has already witnessed the end of existence once before and survived it. Imagine Odin, the All-Father, stepping into the grim darkness of the far future. Odin is not unfamiliar with doom. In his own reality, he spent his entire existence preparing for Ragnarok, sacrificing an eye for knowledge, hanging himself from the world tree to understand the deeper laws of existence, accepting that even gods must die when the cycle demands it. Ragnarok was not a failure in Odin's worldview. It was a conclusion, painful but necessary, an ending that allowed something new to rise from the ashes. But the moment Odin enters the Warhammer 40K galaxy, he understands something is deeply, fundamentally wrong. This is not a universe moving toward an ending. This is a universe trapped in one. Odin arrives not in thunder or glory, but silently, standing on the cracked surface of a dead Aeldari crone world orbiting a fading star. The ground beneath him is shattered wraithbone, twisted by warp exposure, soaked in psychic residue so thick it feels like walking through echoes of screams that never finished being screamed. This world once belonged to the Aeldari, a species that knew perfection, excess, and collapse all too well. Odin feels their presence immediately, not as living beings, but as a lingering wound in reality itself. He senses souls torn from their bodies, devoured by a god they accidentally created, their extinction stretched across millennia instead of ending cleanly. Odin realizes that this galaxy does not allow civilizations the mercy of dying quickly. Everything here is prolonged, sustained just long enough to suffer more. As he walks through the ruins, Odin sees visions, but not in the way a seer would. These are not branching futures or mutable possibilities. These are loops. Humanity burning itself alive in endless war while worshipping a corpse nailed to a throne. The Aeldari fleeing endlessly from Slaanish, preserving their souls only by imprisoning them in stones and circuits, turning their afterlife into a battery. Orcs thriving because conflict itself is their ecosystem. Necrons awakening to reclaim a galaxy already hollowed out. Odin understands the horrifying truth. This universe is not governed by fate as a narrative. It is governed by entropy managed by predators. And in this system, the chaos gods are not ultimate creators or destroyers. They are feedback mechanisms, born from emotional excess and sustained by endless conflict. Odin does not radiate psychic power like the beings of this galaxy. He does not burn brightly in the warp. Instead, his presence is heavy, cold, anchored by sacrifice and knowledge purchased through pain rather than belief. That difference matters. The warp notices him not with fear, but with confusion. Something ancient has entered reality that does not play by the rules of emotion, worship, or corruption. Odin is not powered by hope or hatred. He is powered by understanding and acceptance of inevitability. Across the immaterium, subtle disturbances ripple outward. Not explosions, not screams, but absences. Places where the warp cannot quite touch. On the craft world Ulthwi, far across the void, a farcer performing a routine reading suddenly feels her connection to fate unravel. Her runes scatter across the floor, spinning violently, refusing to settle into any pattern she recognizes. Futures that should exist are simply not there. Probabilities collapse into blanks. This has never happened before, not during the fall of the Aeldari, not during the birth scream of Slaanesh, not even during the Horus heresy. She whispers a single word, filled not with awe but dread: outsider. Eldred Ulthrin feels it as well, a knot forming in the skein of fate where no knot should be possible. Something has entered the galaxy that was never written into its destiny. And that is terrifying. On the dead world, Odin looks up at the distant stars, at a galaxy drowning in endless war, and he understands the scale of what he has stepped into. In his universe, Ragnarok was an end. Here, apocalypse is infrastructure. It is economy, religion, and identity all at once. Odin speaks quietly, not to the galaxy but to himself, acknowledging a truth that chills even him. This is not Ragnarok. This is what happens when an ending is denied forever. And somewhere deep within the warp, ancient gods shift uncomfortably, not because a stronger god has arrived, but because something has come that understands how cycles are supposed to end. The Aeldari do not react to disturbances in fate with curiosity, they react with fear disguised as caution. When the craftworld Ulthwi confirms the location of the anomaly, they do not send armies or aspect warriors, because this is not a threat that can be solved with blades or fire. Instead, they send a farcer Aeltherial, a being trained not to fight enemies, but to negotiate with the future itself. She arrives on the Crone world through the webway, stepping onto shattered ground that still hums with psychic aftershocks from long-dead souls. The moment her boots touch the surface, she feels it, a pressure in her mind unlike anything she has ever encountered. This presence does not scream into the warp, does not ripple with emotion or hunger. It simply exists, heavy and immovable, like a truth that cannot be argued with. She sees Odin standing among the ruins, ravens perched silently nearby, his spear resting against broken wraithbone as if he has been waiting for her arrival. He does not turn when she approaches because he already knows she is there. Aeltherial reaches out psychically, instinctively probing him the way all Aeldari do when encountering something unknown. The result is immediate and violent. Her connection snaps back on itself, runes flaring as if burned, and she staggers, barely keeping her balance. There is no reflection in him. No emotional resonance. No warp presence to latch onto. Odin is not blank. He is sealed, closed off in a way that defies everything she understands about existence. She demands to know what he is, her voice steady but her mind racing. Odin answers without drama, without pride. He tells her he is what remains after an ending, a survivor of a universe that accepted its fate and paid the price. The runes around her scream in protest, futures collapsing and reforming too quickly to interpret. Before she can respond, the ground trembles and reality itself tears open nearby. A warp breach blossoms into existence, drawn not by ritual or emotion, but by Odin's sheer incompatibility with the warp's ecosystem. Demons pour out, shrieking praises to their gods, sensing something unnatural, something that does not belong, something that must be consumed or destroyed. Aeltherial prepares to retreat, calculating survival probabilities, but Odin steps forward instead. This moment becomes the unspoken test. If he is truly outside fate, then the warp itself should not be able to claim him. Odin plants his spear into the ground, not as a weapon but as an anchor, and begins carving runes into the air around the breach. These symbols are not psychic constructs fueled by belief or emotion. They are metaphysical laws, etched with sacrifice, each one representing knowledge purchased through pain. The demons charge, but as the runes complete their patterns, reality hardens. The warp breach does not collapse violently or explode outward. It closes quietly, methodically, like a wound stitched shut and sealed forever. The demons do not scream as they vanish. They simply cease to exist, their connection to the immaterium severed so completely that even their gods will not remember them. The effort costs Odin dearly. Blood runs from his remaining eye, his ravens cry out in pain, and for a moment, Aeldari realizes that this being's power is not infinite. It is transactional. Everything he does has a price and he pays it willingly. She understands this kind of power all too well because the Aeldari have been paying prices for survival since the fall. Odin does not claim victory. He does not boast. He merely states that this galaxy's wounds are deeper than she understands. Aeldari brings him to Ulthwi not as an ally, but as an existential anomaly that must be studied, debated, and possibly destroyed. Their journey through the webway is anything but peaceful. Warp entities are drawn to Odin like predators circling unfamiliar prey, including a bloated demon of decay, swollen with disease and entropy, laughing as reality rots around it. Odin fights but not with overwhelming force. He observes, adapts, and seals rather than destroys, learning how the warp reacts to denial instead of resistance. He realizes that the chaos gods are not omnipotent tyrants, but systems dependent on participation. They do not create suffering, they harvest it. This revelation disturbs Aeldari deeply, because it aligns with truths the Aeldari have long feared but refused to accept. When they finally reach Ulthwi, the craft world rises before Odin like a monument to defiance against extinction. Vast halls of wraithbone glow softly, infinity circuits hum with the trapped souls of the dead, and everywhere there is beauty built atop desperation. Odin walks through the craft world in silence, feeling a civilization stretched thin across time, living on borrowed moments, refusing to let go. He understands them instantly because he too once tried to delay an ending. At the heart of Ulthwi, Eldred Ulthrin waits. He has already seen fragments of this meeting in broken futures that refuse to resolve. When Odin and Eldred face each other, there is no hostility, only recognition. Two beings who understand fate not as superstition, but as structure, stand at the center of a galaxy that is breaking under the weight of its own refusal to end. Eldred realizes something terrifying in that moment. This outsider is not here to save them. He is here to ask a question the galaxy has avoided for 10,000 years. What if survival itself is the problem? Eldred Ulthrin does not welcome Odin as a guest, nor does he treat him as an enemy because Eldred understands something that most beings in the galaxy do not. Threats that come from outside fate itself cannot be confronted with conventional choices. Their meeting takes place within the deepest chamber of Ulthwi, surrounded by wraithbone walls that hum softly with the souls of the dead, each one a reminder of the price the Aeldari have paid to avoid extinction. Eldred speaks first, not with arrogance, but with the calm authority of someone who has watched entire civilizations die through probabilities alone. He explains that the Aeldari do not seek victory, only survival, that every choice they make is designed to push annihilation one step further into the future. Odin listens without interruption, his expression unreadable, his remaining eye focused not on Eldred's face but on the infinity circuit pulsing behind him. When Eldred finishes, Odin responds with a statement that cuts deeper than any insult. He tells Eldred that survival without an ending is not defiance of fate, it is submission to a worse one. This statement fractures the council instantly. To the Aeldari, survival itself is rebellion, a refusal to accept the punishment of extinction. Odin counters that what they are doing is not rebellion but delay, and delay has allowed the galaxy's predators to grow fat. He explains that in his world, Ragnarok was inevitable, but it mattered because it ended the cycle, because it destroyed gods, structures, and identities so something new could exist. Here, the chaos gods ensure the cycle never concludes, because endless conflict feeds them eternally. Odin calls them not gods of fate, but gods of stagnation, sustained by civilizations too afraid to let go. Eldred challenges this, arguing that allowing extinction is the ultimate failure, that choosing an ending is indistinguishable from surrender. Odin responds with brutal clarity. He tells Eldred that the Aeldari already surrendered the moment they chose preservation over transformation, the moment they imprisoned their dead rather than letting their civilization truly die and be reborn in another form. This is not cruelty, it is diagnosis. Odin is not condemning them, he is explaining the mechanics of their suffering. He points out that humanity worships a corpse not because the emperor demands it, but because hope has been weaponized against them, turned into a system that maintains obedience and war. He explains that hope, in this galaxy, is not a virtue but a control mechanism, a promise that keeps civilizations functioning while ensuring nothing fundamentally changes. The council reacts with anger, fear, and denial, because Odin is attacking the one thing every faction clings to more desperately than life itself: identity. Eldred begins to see the true danger Odin represents. Not physical annihilation but philosophical collapse. If Odin is right, then everything the Aeldari have done since the fall has been a sophisticated form of self-torture, prolonging extinction instead of redefining existence. Odin admits something then, something that unsettles even him. His power is not absolute here. Every rune he carves, every warp breach he seals weakens him. This galaxy resists him because it is not built to accept endings. The rules are different, the cost higher. He cannot force the conclusion. It must be chosen, and that choice would require sacrifices no faction is willing to make. Eldred realizes the terrifying implication. For the first time in tens of thousands of years, the future is not unreadable because it is hidden, but because it no longer exists in a fixed form. Odin's presence has introduced uncertainty at a structural level. The skein of fate has lost its rigidity. This should be liberating, but instead it is paralyzing. Without prophecy, without inevitability, the Aeldari must confront responsibility. And responsibility is heavier than doom. As the council disperses in fractured silence, Odin senses the warp reacting. Not with rage but with adaptation. The chaos gods are aware now. They cannot see him clearly but they feel disruption. Korn finds no rage to cling to. Sench finds knowledge that cannot be stolen through manipulation. Nurgle finds decay resisted not by healing, but by denial of entropy itself. Slainish feels something far worse than rejection, the possibility of irrelevance. Odin understands then that the chaos gods cannot be slain through violence. They must be starved. But starvation requires civilizations to stop feeding them emotion, conflict, obsession, and fear. That would require humanity to abandon worship, the Aeldari to abandon preservation, and the galaxy to abandon endless war as identity. Odin knows the cost is likely too high. As he leaves the chamber, Eldred watches him go with the realization that this outsider has not come to save them or destroy them. He has come to expose a truth the galaxy may not survive understanding. That eternal struggle is not courage. It is addiction. And endings are not always the enemy. The moment Odin's presence settles fully into the fabric of the galaxy, the immaterium begins to change in subtle but terrifying ways. There are no great explosions, no screaming warp storms ripping reality apart in immediate response, because the chaos gods do not react to Odin the way they react to rivals. They react to him the way an ecosystem reacts to poison that does not kill instantly but disrupts reproduction. Across the warp, currents shift unnaturally. Demonic manifestations fail in places they should not. Rituals that have worked flawlessly for millennia begin to misfire without explanation. This confuses the servants of chaos, but it alarms their gods deeply. Khorne senses battlefields where rage should be overflowing, yet something dampens it, not by peace but by inevitability. Warriors fight, kill, and die, but the emotional resonance is thinner, as if the conflict lacks meaning beyond momentum. Khorne does not hate Odin because hatred requires emotional access and Odin offers none. Tsench attempts to observe him, to map his existence into probabilities, but Odin's knowledge does not branch. It is paid for. Every truth he carries was purchased through sacrifice, not stolen from possibility, making it impossible for the changer of ways to fully manipulate. Nergal, the god of decay and acceptance, feels something even more disturbing. Odin does not fear entropy. He denies it. Where Odin acts, rot does not transform into new growth, it simply ends. And Slaanesh, the youngest and most fragile of the gods, senses a threat unlike any other. Odin does not resist temptation. He renders it irrelevant. This is what terrifies the chaos gods most. Odin is not opposing them with force. He is questioning the conditions that allow them to exist. As a result, they begin to adapt. Warp entities grow more aggressive in regions Odin has influenced, not out of hatred but desperation. They must feed harder, faster, louder because something is reducing the supply. Eldred watches these changes with growing dread. He understands now that Odin's presence alone destabilizes the balance the galaxy has been trapped in for 10,000 years. The Chaos Gods thrive not on victory, but on continuation. Endless war, endless fear, endless desire. Odin represents an ending, and endings are starvation. Odin, however, does not declare war on the warp. He moves carefully, intervening only where necessary, sealing warp breaches that would have consumed entire systems, unraveling prophecies that lock civilizations into predictable suffering. Each act weakens him. His ravens die and return altered, quieter, less connected. His spear develops fractures that do not heal. He bleeds more often. Odin is discovering the price of operating in a universe that rejects conclusions. This galaxy fights endings as aggressively as it fights invaders. The Aeldari debate furiously. Some believe Odin is accelerating doom by provoking the Chaos Gods. Others believe he represents the only chance to fundamentally change the rules of existence. Humanity, meanwhile, remains largely unaware. The Imperium is too vast, too broken, too consumed by its own inertia to notice a philosophical earthquake. On Terra, the Emperor feels Odin's presence faintly, like an echo of a choice he once made differently. Two beings who understand sacrifice exist in the same galaxy, separated by tragedy, ideology, and time. Odin senses this connection but does not pursue it. He knows the Emperor's path was shaped by refusal to let go, by the belief that humanity must be preserved at any cost. Odin has seen where that road leads. As the Chaos Gods push back harder, Odin reaches a realization he cannot ignore. This galaxy may not be saved. Not because salvation is impossible, but because no faction is willing to pay the price required. Ending the cycle would require humanity to abandon worship, to accept mortality without divine scaffolding. It would require the Aeldari to release their dead and allow their civilization to truly end, not linger as a ghost powered by trapped souls. It would require the galaxy to stop defining itself through war. And war is the only thing most species here understand. Odin recognizes the bitter irony. The Chaos Gods are not the ultimate villains of this universe. They are consequences. They are what happens when civilizations choose continuation over transformation. Odin's power was never meant to impose endings by force. It was meant to prepare beings to accept them. As the warp grows louder and more chaotic in response to his influence, Odin begins to withdraw. Not out of defeat but out of understanding. If he stays too long, the galaxy will break itself trying to reject him. And a forced ending is no ending at all. Eldred senses Odin's decision and understands its weight. The future has not been saved, but it has been destabilized. And destabilization in a universe addicted to stagnation is revolutionary. Odin prepares to leave behind something far more dangerous than power. He prepares to leave knowledge. And knowledge, once introduced, cannot be unlearned. Odin does not announce his departure to the galaxy, because endings that are meant to matter do not require witnesses. He returns to the dead crone world where he first arrived, standing once more among shattered wraithbone and the fossilized echoes of Aeldari souls who never truly escaped their fate. The star above the world is dimmer now, or perhaps Odin simply perceives it differently, because after walking through a galaxy that refuses to die, even light feels tired. Odin knows he cannot remain. His presence alone has begun to strain the foundations of reality, not through violence but through contradiction. This universe is built on continuation, on cycles that feed upon themselves, and Odin represents the possibility of conclusion. That contradiction cannot coexist indefinitely. Before he leaves, however, Odin does what he has always done best. He leaves something behind that cannot be destroyed by weapons, demons, or gods. He leaves understanding. On Ulthwi, within a hidden chamber of wraithbone that resonates with both living minds and trapped souls, Odin carves a final set of runes. These are not spells, not weapons, and not prophecies. They are statements of truth, etched into reality itself, explaining the mechanics of the warp, the nature of chaos, and the cost of eternal survival. The runes do not promise salvation. They do not offer victory. They explain why the galaxy suffers and, more importantly, why it continues to suffer. Eldred is present when this is done, watching in silence as Odin bleeds with every symbol carved, understanding that this knowledge comes at a price even a god cannot avoid paying. Odin tells Eldred that fate is not a chain that binds the galaxy, but a direction it has chosen repeatedly out of fear. He explains that the chaos gods will never be destroyed as long as civilizations define themselves through emotion without resolution. Rage without conclusion feeds Khorne. Desire without fulfillment feeds Slaanesh. Change without purpose feeds Tsench. Decay without release feeds Nurgle. Odin explains that the galaxy does not lack heroes or warriors. It lacks the courage to end what no longer deserves to exist. Eldred understands the implication immediately. The Aeldari's endless attempt to preserve themselves has turned their civilization into a mausoleum powered by suffering. Humanity's refusal to accept mortality has turned the Emperor into a prison rather than a savior. Even the Chaos Gods are trapped, sustained by systems they did not create but now cannot escape. Odin does not judge them. Judgment is meaningless without alternatives. He simply states that cycles only end when participants choose to stop feeding them. When Odin leaves Ulthwi for the final time, the craft world feels different. Not safer. Not saved. Heavier. The infinity circuits hum more quietly, as if the souls within them have heard something they cannot forget. Eldred stands alone, staring at the runes long after Odin is gone, realizing that for the first time in his long existence, prophecy offers no shelter. There is no future to hide behind, no inevitable outcome to justify sacrifice. Only choice. Across the galaxy, subtle changes ripple outward. Warp storms do not vanish, but some grow weaker. Demonic incursions fail in unexpected places. Cultists scream louder, preach harder, because belief feels less certain than it did before. The Chaos Gods adapt, as parasites always do, but adaptation is not the same as security. They feel something new spreading through the galaxy, something quiet and corrosive. Doubt. Not doubt in their existence, but doubt in their necessity. On Terra, the Emperor's fractured consciousness brushes against the echo of Odin's departure. For a brief moment, there is clarity, a memory of a choice made long ago, a path not taken. The moment passes, buried beneath ritual, worship, and pain. Humanity continues as it always has, but somewhere deep within the Imperium, a seed has been planted. Not hope. Awareness. Odin returns to the dead world where his journey began, weaker now, his form less stable, his ravens silent. He has not failed, but neither has he succeeded in the way mortals measure success. He has not saved the galaxy. He has not destroyed it. He has done something far more dangerous. He has shown it that endless suffering is not inevitable. As Odin fades from the Warhammer 40K universe, his final understanding crystallizes. Ragnarok was mercy because it ended. This galaxy's true horror is not war, chaos, or extinction. It is continuation without meaning. The galaxy continues to burn, continues to fight, continues to decay, but now it does so with a new burden. The knowledge that it could end differently. And that knowledge, once introduced, cannot be erased by any god. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is still only war, but now there is also something else, something infinitely more dangerous to the powers that rule existence. The possibility of an ending.